have his fingers amputated.
In New York, off the coast of Brooklyn, Dead Horse Bay is the first port of call for extreme weather slamming into the city. It's being hammered by ferocious storms such as Hurricanes Ida and Sandy. The latest casualty is a 200-ton barge.
The barge we are salvaging, right now it's a wreck because it's underwater. All right, let's get the weight belt.
Zednik Ullman, known as Captain Z, has been tasked with removing this mammoth 200-ton underwater obstruction that's been sitting in a tidal bay.
A lot of anticipation with that salvage. That peer pressure, it drives me crazy.
Being a small company is challenging because I do not have a large equipment. There is a lot of technicality involved in this kind of work. I got the smaller operation and I can get things done.
Z's already attempted to raise the barge once before and failed. Now he's $50,000 out of pocket.
I had a lot on the lines. I kept buying equipment, buying parts, paying salaries. It was just crazy, tremendous investment on my part.
Now Z has come up with an innovative and cheaper plan to get the job done.
The upper deck of the barge has the openings, so you can actually enter the barge inside. Those openings are called hatches. This is going to be the hatch cover. It has these threaded rods with the braces on the other side, and it's going to get screwed tight. Once the hatch is installed, these will get connected with the hose to the pumps up top. Over here, a very important port, the air intake or the snorkel. It's a nice float.
The barge is secured by spuds, steel poles that anchor it in place. Z has built wooden hatches that will be sealed onto openings in the barge's compartments. Pumps will then suck the water out through hoses connected to the hatches. Then, the barge should float to the surface. But the whole salvage operation depends on the winter low tide, due in under a month.
The low tide had to be one of the lowest tides in the year. We only have two, and they happen during the winter. So we can't miss it. We gotta be like ready, ready, ready.
Today, Z needs to fit the first hatch, but the water temperature is only 42 degrees.
So because I'm spoiled, this is my heated vest. It's gonna keep me nice and warm.
We actually had to make platforms on the water so we can work right next to the wreck. We cannot just be swimming in the water.
The hatch is so buoyant that Z needs to attach cinder blocks to make it sink below the surface.
The hatches needs to be installed on every access compartment to the barge.
And then we're gonna basically drop it and go for it. Don't get caught on line. We still need to add more weight to it to make it sink.
Z was expecting the hatch would sink with the weight of the blocks, but his plan is not working. The whole operation depends on fitting the hatches, so he needs to find a solution. He adds more cinder blocks to help weigh it down.
Just tie it off, tie it off. It doesn't have to be tight. Just like hang it off, okay? Just cut the line.
With the extra load, the hatch is finally underwater and under control. Now it's time to attach the braces.
I can actually feel the cold. It's taking the toll on me. My hand dexterity is not the best. I'm losing the washers, I'm losing the nuts. It's very hard to tighten things up, and it's just, I'm losing focus.
There is only a small gap now to seal the hatch completely airtight. The first hatch is successfully fitted into position, but there are still 5 more to go.
All right, so the hatch is in.
When I finally got the hatch into the place, it was just very rewarding. It was just perfect, 100% watertight. I'm like, you know what, man? This is gonna work.
But there's still a lot of work to do, and Z can't afford to fail. The barge must be ready to be raised on the lunar low tide in 4 weeks' time. In New York, in Dead Horse Bay, the big salvage day has arrived for Captain Z. It's been 4 weeks since the hatches were fitted. Now Z needs to raise the 200-ton beast of a barge from the bottom of the marina. But a winter storm hit 24 hours ago and has brought with it freezing cold working conditions.
The operation actually is taking place during one of the coldest days in the whole winter.
But in 3 hours' time, the lunar tide will be at its lowest level to raise the vessel. So it's now or never.
These pumps, they can only lift the water to about 26 feet. So for that reason, we need the lowest possible tide to be closer to the sunken wreck.
The pumps are most effective when the tide drops to its lowest point, bringing them closer to the barge for more pumping power. Then, they'll suck the water out of the 6 compartments, whilst floating snorkels will fill the space with air. Then the barge should float to the surface. Z has already sunk $50,000 of his own money into this salvage, and he can't afford for it to fail.
Good luck.
All right, thank you.
All 6 hatches have been successfully installed, but Z needs to make sure every single one is airtight.
So each hatch has 3 hoses, so 3 pumps.
The hatches are secured, but as well as managing all the equipment underwater, Z also has to direct the crew on the surface.
Don't grab anything. Get the hose first.
So you got 3, right?
Yeah.
The gas-powered dewatering pumps have a 6.5 horsepower engine that can pump 290 gallons per minute. Z monitors the level of water from each compartment by listening and looking inside the snorkels connected to them. With this information, he can then fine-tune each pump to dewater the barge evenly.
As the water gets pumped out, the snorkel introduces the air inside to the barge. The air inside of the wreck will actually give us the buoyancy.
But the water level in the right back compartment is not going down.
All right, let's go.
We really had a problem with the back corner of the barge. We couldn't pump with the pump, so we were battling that end of the barge.
Z suspects there may be a hole letting water into the compartment and wants to try a new technique.
I designed a very powerful blower, and for that one particular hatch, I introduced the blower from the top of the hatch inside to actually push the water out of the barge through the bottom.
We are pumping the air into the barge, and in the floor there is a big hole, so it's slowly displacing the water out of that hole.
That blower actually proved to be so important to save the day.
Crisis averted. Finally, the 200-ton behemoth barge is starting to emerge. But it still contains a lot of water. And with only 40 minutes left of the low tide, they will need to pull out all the stops to get the barge home and dry. In New York, in Dead Horse Bay, Captain Z and his team are still battling to raise the 200-ton barge.
Low tide stays for about 40 minutes. And then this bay, it's getting literally flooded. It gets flooded so fast. So my fear is that we'll actually be able to get more water out than what's coming in. And within that golden hour, hour and a half, the barge is gonna come up.
But the barge isn't rising in the back left-hand corner.
Hey, Captain Z, you gotta start this side. You got too much water there. That corner's not coming up for some reason.
Okay, I'll go check.
Right now, that corner's out of the water. This corner is out of the water. That corner's out of the water. We're still pumping the back corner there. Well, this barge is old, so there's water shifting all the way in the barge from spot to spot. So when you take water out of part of the barge, it will go in a different direction again. So the trick is to find the right spot, the right place to do the right kind of pumping.
They need to quickly fire up another pump, or the 200-ton barge could flip over.
The way we have the pump set up, it's actually to keep in the balance of the barge. It's very important not to flip the barge over side to side. One side would be filled with water, one side would be filled with air, meaning one side is lighter, one side is heavier. And if the difference is too big, then the barge can actually flip over and game over.
Bring the hose.
So we're adding one extra pump on that side. So that is one extra hose. So we can keep the barge in balance and keep pumping it.
It's all hands on deck to try and empty the water at the same rate across all 6 compartments to keep the barge level.
The crew has to reduce or increase the pumping power as the barge is coming up. So the barge actually comes up as evenly, as horizontal, as flat as possible.
Now the operation has reached a critical point. The hatches must come off.
Thinking of starting removing the hatches.
I know
Once
what
you're
you're
removing, there is no way back.
Once you have the deck edge out of the water, you get more control. You can take the hatches off and you can put pumps down to really dewater everything.
You're going to have to remove those hatches very fast, disconnect all the hoses, and drop the intake hoses directly into the barge.
First, he must remove the threaded rods using a modified rigid cordless drill. With the 100-pound hatch removed, Z jumps inside the compartment to check the water situation. Inside, there is still 1.5 feet of water.
The intake hoses on the hatches are not going completely into the floor of the barge. The hoses from the hatches are shorter, so we cannot get all the water out.
Z puts longer hoses inside to reach the remaining water at the bottom of the compartment.
So the problem we have right now is that the barge sits too far by the stern. The only way we can bring it up is by getting this one as empty as possible, the one we're working right now, and hopefully then the whole barge will have come up a little more and it gives them a little bit more space to work with.
But the dewatering pumps are not powerful enough on their own.
We have to be super fast. We have the hatch down, and the barge goes down. It'll just go all through that hatch into the barge, and we'll lose it.
Captain Z uses a 45-pound submersible hydraulic pump, which is 5 times more powerful than the normal pumps.
There's a lot of money at stake with all the equipment and the crew. We don't get paid until the barge is raised and tugged out of here.
With the extra help from the hydraulic pump, the barge is finally afloat. But the light is fading, and they still need to patch the hole in the back right-hand corner.
We got a little problem with the back corner. See if I can patch the hole, and then we should gain on it in a way that it should actually come out of the water completely.
Z and his team gather the materials to create a patch.
And now we can patch the big hole, which actually made the barge sunk. So that's amazing news.
I'm gonna have to use a soft patch, which is the combination over here with the plywood, with the soft rubber mat glued on it. Then you push the patch with the rubber facing the barge, and that's almost 100% watertight.
Captain Z needs to brave the water one more time and make sure this last patch is completely leak-proof. Tomorrow, it's make or break. In New York, off the coast of Brooklyn in Dead Horse Bay, Captain Z and his team have managed to patch the hole at the back left compartment and keep the 200-ton barge afloat.
So our wreck is finally up. It's dewatered.
But there is still one very important job to do. One of the 4 vertical steel cylinders that anchors the barge, called spuds, got bent under the barge during the storm that sank the structure. Z must now cut the spud where it's bent to set it free. Then all the spuds must be removed before the barge is towed away. The pressure is on as the towboat and crane could arrive at any moment.
I'm going directly under the barge, and we'll see if we can break that spud off.
So hopefully, when I make that cut, we'll have some of it in the barge and some of it sticking away from the barge.
The spud pipe is ruptured where it bent, and Z targets this area. He uses an exothermic torch, which can reach a temperature of 10,000 degrees to cut through the 2-inch thick steel spud underwater. But there are dangers.
When I'm cutting down below, there are actually gases, the hydrogen, releasing from the torch. And if that hydrogen travels up to that pipe and collects up top, it can ignite. And it's a big bomb. It will rip that steel of the spud open, and anything what's around would have a problem. And that's just me who's around, so you can figure.
It's a perilous task, and Z is working in near freezing temperatures. He's already been in the water for over an hour, but he decides to carry on to finish the job.
When Z's down there, it's like I'm holding my breath because you never know what can happen. You can get stuck on something. There could be some kind of entrapment. I mean, there's all kinds of things under the water.
It took so long. It was a battle. My body was cold, and keeping the focus was very challenging. My fingers, my hands were completely shot.
Z is at risk of hypothermia if he doesn't warm up his body soon.
Water is super cold. I can't even describe. All my work has to end, and I'm coming up. Come here. Oh. My hands are so cold. Oh.
There's hot water here.
Oh. The pain what sets in my hands and fingers, there are no words for it. There really isn't. Oh. What's causing that pain? It's like unbearable.
I don't know if he was in longer than it usually is or the water was colder than it usually is, but when he came out, his hands, he couldn't feel his fingers.
Oh, this is perfect. Okay. Oh, the pain is unbearable.
And I thought that perhaps he might have frostbite and have to have his fingers amputated. That's how badly it looked.
The towboat and crane finally arrive, but luckily, Z was able to cut the spud just in time. His fingers have recovered, and he is okay.
That spud cut, that's so important, because that would ruin the whole salvage. We would lose the barge to the bottom.
The crane can now start removing the spuds from the barge and set it free.
The tow tugboat finally came with the crane and the crane barge. The only little task what there is left for the crane is to remove spuds from the wreck barge. This way, the barge will be ready for the tow and will be free floating.
It's almost mission accomplished for Captain Z and his team.
It was amazing, and this is something what I'm really proud of.
After a Herculean effort, the barge is on its way to the salvage yard, and Z will get the money he's invested in the salvage back and more.